Welcome, everybody, to TRB Live. That's right. We are here to talk to you on the Resistance broadcast about all the latest going on in Star Wars. This is our Thursday show, or Friday if you're listening on podcast apps. However you're taking in TRB, thank you. And we appreciate you listening, watching, being a part of TRB in any way, shape, or form. So it's good to be here. I'm John. That's James right there.
Hi.
There he is. And Lacey Gilleran should be back with us next Thursday because we are going to be ending our year with a bang. And that doesn't mean we're doing a bold prediction show. That means we are doing our Christmas holiday party. It's going to be festive. It's going to be fun. It's going to be live. We're going to probably announce some giveaways and, of course, talk Star Wars. So tune in with us next Thursday. But right now you're here with us on this Thursday and you're checking out this episode. And we're going to talk about a lot of things. But before we get into any of that, James, first wanted to ask you, what hat is that? Because that does not look like a soccer hat.
No,
I could be wrong. It does not look like a Star Wars hat. So what's going on?
it's just a clothing company. It's like Vans.
Oh, you got a sponsorship? Nice, dude.
No. I wish. That'd be great.
But to start the show, we just want to again say thank you if you're in the live chat. We are going to be doing Ask the Resistance later in the show. So if you have any questions that you think would be cool for us to discuss, pop them in the chat. Use hashtag Ask the Resistance so we know that you want that question for the show, and we will get to as many as we can. We also do have the super chat option available where you can hyperspace your way to the front of the line and have your comment read on the show at any point in time, and we will react to that as well. But other than that, just sit back, relax, enjoy the show. James, did you hear about that KOTOR sort of cryptic message by the head of gaming at Disney?
I did. I can't follow this story. I
can't. Look, I can't either, dude. Because I'm not a big gamer, but I do know how big KOTOR is. Like my buddy Kevin Smets, who you probably know from the Schmodown, he did this whole movie using KOTOR, and like it's this big, like KOTOR is this huge thing. Knights of the Old Republic, that video game, that culture, it's just like this own subsection of fandom. And anytime people get teases that they are bringing it back, oh, now they're not, now they are. I'm just going to go with the quote here. And this is from Sean Shoptow, who is the head of gaming at Disney. And about the Knights of the Old Republic remake, he said, quote, "Not a lot I can say on that point for some hopefully obvious reasons, but KOTOR is obviously," so he likes obviously. KOTOR is obviously an incredibly popular game, one that we are incredibly, well, he used incredibly twice too. One that we are incredibly proud of and think that there's still a lot of demand for. I'll leave it there. So, what do you think? Does he think that means they're definitely making a new version of the game for sure, or do you think it's he wants them to, but Disney's not pulling the trigger because of what's going on with the economy and their budgets, or do you think it's just it's not time yet to fully reveal it?
I guess my thoughts are probably that Disney knows that if they make the game will make money, but they're having a hard time justifying that in some regard as to like which studios or who's making that thing. Because I feel like the rumors of it being canceled had more to do with the studio and how they were unable to like somehow like make it work. Like they were pulling out, it's not happening anymore, and those comments came from the studio. So this coming from Disney makes it seem to me like like they're saying like we are gonna do everything we can to make that game. We want to make that game, but I really can't say much because you can't confirm anything with who they're working with, because they have their own demands on like how they want things to be announced and or something like that. And it could still be the same studio. It could just be that they're waiting to I don't know, say more. I'm not really sure, but again, I feel like it was sort of a studio thing.
Yeah.
And this is the head of Disney just saying like, we like this game, we want to make it.
Yeah, head of Disney Gaming. And we don't, I don't know this guy or his personality or how he teases things, but I mean, it sounds promising though for fans of KOTOR. Like, if this same quote was like you just replaced KOTOR with Solo, and I heard this from the head of something at Disney, I'd be like, holy cow, we might be on something. So very cool. But yeah, so if you do have questions about that or about any of the topics we're about to talk about here in Resistance Report, definitely drop it in the chat with hashtag Ask the Resistance, and we'll get to that later in the show. But James, it is time to fire up the news and get into what is going on, including that very interesting first story.
Yeah, let's do it.
It's the Resistance.
All right. Well, everybody wants to hear about this first story. We put it as the title card because it was one of these things where when we heard it, when we saw it, Lacey actually sent it over in the chat and was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe, I know she's dying to talk about this stuff. But it's one of these things where we saw it, we watched the clip, and it's really interesting sequel trilogy news. Like, you don't get a lot of the actors or the producers or the directors stuff talking about it much past, unless it's like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago when we did that movie or something. So every once in a while you'll get a little spatter of something from somebody, and this week it was Adam Driver being interviewed on the Rich Eisen show, was asked about the movie and the trilogy and how everything came together, and he was like, well, and he sort of just gets into it. Actually, I think we have the clip, so why don't we just go ahead and show everybody, and everybody can
I like that you're doing the bit, and you're like, I think we have the clip, even though you're the one who got the clip and put it up.
I don't know what you're talking about. Hey Jerry, can we get that? Can we get it pulled up? Is that possible? We could just put it on screen. Okay, good.
Jerry.
All right. Yeah. Hey Jamie, pull this out. All right, we got it right here. I'll go ahead and play it.
But did you know that at least you're playing Vader 2.0? Like, at least did you know that as conceptually?
I did. Yeah. And I had an overall arc in mind that he wanted to do, which then changed. But his idea was that almost the opposite journey of Vader, where Vader starts the most confident, the most committed to the dark side, and by the last movie he's the most vulnerable and weak, and he wanted to start at the opposite, where this character was the most confused and vulnerable, and by the end of the 3 movies would be most committed to the dark side. So I tried to keep that arc in mind, regardless if that wound up not being the journey anyway, because it changed, obviously, as we were shooting.
Yeah, right.
But I was still kind of focused on that.
When did it change?
Well, with Ryan, he took it into a different direction, but still, it kind of still tracked with the character. Then the last one, it changed into being, about them and the dyad and things like that.
And then again, so you
and kind of evolving into Ben Solo. That was never part of it.
That wasn't either.
No.
Because
Ben Solo, he was Ben Solo from the beginning, but it wasn't. It was never a version where we actually see Ben Solo when I first signed up for it.
Oh,
it's wild stuff. And I don't know if you had like a setup question to toss to me, but just even in some of his trepidation after a certain question, it's almost like he wasn't sure how to answer it. And he's like, so when did that change? And he's like, he paused. And he's like, well, during the last one and while we were shooting. So it's like, and we had heard that. There's nothing new. Some of this really isn't new to us. Like, we heard that they were changing things as we were filming episode 9. Yeah. But to hear the actor say
and we sort of have been always in the mindset of justifying someone saying, well, they should have done all 3 the same way. We're like, well, they've always done movie to movie to movie. You know what I mean? They always handed it off. They always didn't start writing until the next one, so
there's now the prequels are one thing. That story had to be told the way it was told because it has to lead up to episode 4. So let's take that out and then just focus on the untouchable golden trilogy of the original trilogy. And I mean, we've talked about it on this podcast. We had J.W. Rinsler on twice, and he told us, a lot of the cool anecdotes from his books and a lot of the conversations he had. And it's just a fact that the original trilogy really was piece by piece, in so much so that Leia was not Luke's sister until the second draft of Return of the Jedi. So Empire Strikes Back was written, filmed, and completed as almost this love triangle and not this, sibling thing. As you talk about the multiple kisses with Leia and Luke at, even at the end. But now that we look back on it, it's this fluid thing. And even Vader was the guy who killed Luke's father in the first Star Wars movie. It wasn't, Obi-Wan wasn't lying in the first movie.
Right.
And then George Lucas changes it, and all of a sudden Obi-Wan's this big liar. But it's so, and those are big, massive moments in Star Wars, and we're okay with it. So I don't mind that they also did the same thing here. Now, I understand it was more of a handing of the baton and handing back. But I want to ask you, I do want to get into his answers more, and maybe even, we usually don't do this, watch it again, watch it one more time.
We could skip through it. Yeah. I think this is one of those things, like, I'm not usually someone to be like, let's really deep dive into what a celebrity said in an interview, and try to pull out like all these secret intentions or whatever.
Yeah.
But it is quite filled up with juicy things where you're like, well, he answered it this way, which really does make me think that, there's this and this and this. And I think, like, right off the top, one of the things that really sticks out to me is he says that the Rian Johnson movie still tracked.
He said Ryan did it different, but it still tracked. Ryan took it in a direction,
Different direction, but it's still tracked. So that means to me, or that is sort of for me saying that Adam Driver thought of that movie because he didn't know where 9 was going to go. He still thought at the end of 8 that 9 could still be totally villainous.
Right. Exactly.
Kylo Ren.
Yeah. And based on what he said about how it changed during shooting, they might have went into episode 9 filming the J.J. Abrams episode 9 with that on the table.
Yeah.
And it does make you think, now that you look back on the post Death Star wreckage duel in Rise of Skywalker, he only has one line. It's ow. There's no dialogue for him throughout. Maybe the Harrison Ford thing was added later. Maybe Kylo Ren was supposed to die right there on the Death Star at the hands of Rey. She stabs him. He dies. Then she goes to face Palpatine. I don't know. I would love to know. I don't want to get too far in the speculation on like what would have been with the episode 9 thing. I wouldn't mind rewatching this clip, and we don't usually do this, but stopping after each answer of each question and like sort of segmenting it, because you're right. There is, if you look at how he answers things and the certain word choices he makes, we can probably point to some logical conclusions.
Yeah. All right. Well, stop me if you want me to stop.
Okay. Did you know that at least you're playing Vader 2.0? Like, at least did you know that as conceptually?
I did. Yeah. And I had an overall arc in mind that he wanted to do, which, then changed. But his idea was that almost the opposite journey of Vader, where Vader starts the most confident, the most committed to the dark side, and by the last movie he's the most vulnerable and weak, and he wanted to start at the opposite, where this character was the most confused and vulnerable, and by the end of the 3 movies would be most committed to the dark side. So I tried to keep that arc in mind, regardless if that wound up not being the journey anyway.
Okay, so he approached the entire thing. So everything we saw him film, essentially, he did it with the mindset, and this is all through The Last Jedi and even into the filming of Rise of Skywalker, that this guy was heading further and further into the dark side. That's how Adam Driver approached the character.
Right. And before we even get into that, I think there's a lot of discussion over the whole reverse Vader conversation as well. So the kind of concept of J.J. Abrams saying, how am I going to do Star Wars differently? Well, famously, Star Wars is you have this character that is evil at the beginning and slowly starts to turn back to the light. We want to have a character who's sort of not on the light side, but is sort of unsure of himself and then gets darker and darker and darker. And almost like that point when he was still, that we see Vader on the light side, you know, in reverse, is not actually in this movie. It happened, you know, just before this movie. When Luke decides to go to the island and you know, turn him hide himself away and all this stuff, and it's because there was this moment where he flipped just like Vader, but it was off screen. And then what you're seeing now through this trilogy is just descendants of a character.
Yeah, let's play a little further and stop it after he talks about what
you don't want to talk about the reverse Vader.
Well, I want to, but
okay,
I want to incorporate the part he said about the still tracks stuff.
Okay, all right. We play it.
Because it changed, obviously, as we were shooting.
Yeah, right.
Right, but I was still kind of focused on that.
When did it change?
Well, with Ryan, he took it into a different direction, but still it kind of still tracked with the character. Than the last one, it changed.
Let's stop here. So he's saying Ryan took it in a different direction. What do you think that is? Do you think that's just him and Rey connecting through the Force? Do you think that's what he's alluding to? That's my initial thought. But he's saying it's still tracked, which means everything that happened in TLJ, the Rey connection through the Force, him having hesitation to fire upon Leia, all these things that we see of like, oh, he's unsure. In his mind, it's still tracked with this path and descent into darkness, which reminds me a bit of Anakin, because the confusion of Anakin also helped feed his journey to the dark side. So him saying it's still tracked, even though he did something different, I kind of like that. Because for Adam Driver, because people will say, well, Kylo Ren in TFA and then Kylo Ren in Last Jedi, it's almost like a different character. He takes the mask off and he's all of a sudden starts connecting with Rey and stuff. But to Adam Driver, it didn't, in terms of how he played the character and how he saw the path. I find that to be interesting. Now, I know you want to talk more about the reverse Vader thing, though. But
well, I think when it comes to the how do I see his comments on Rian Johnson changing it, going in a different direction, I think that when you're approached with this idea during Force Awakens, it's that there's this character Rey, and at first you guys maybe, you know, are kind of talking and she's kind of discovering who you are and stuff like that. But by the second movie and by the third movie, you're going to be even more enemies. So I think he was thinking that the second movie, he would really not have any sort of connection with this lead character of Rey, and that they would be battling enemies the entire time. The different direction I think he's referring to is this whole, like, I didn't think we were going to be conversing as much and maybe even like sort of connecting and understanding each other on a certain level. But I think what he's saying is, though, my character I still played it as, but she's not convincing me of anything. Right. I'm not changing my mind. She's not turning me to the light. I'm maybe willing to toy with her and try to pull her to the dark, but I'm not actually being swayed back until the Rise of Skywalker, and then you can say, okay, well, we're sort of changing that, and that also tracks with what we did in the last movie as well. That maybe that's not what you were thinking when you filmed it, but we could sort of spin it and say that, you know, that character was equally being pulled to the light as you were sort of thinking you were pulling Rey to the dark.
Yeah, And TFA and TLJ have a lot of similarities that aren't maybe as on the surface, but when you really think about it, you know, going back to Shakespearean stories or anybody who's in this quest for power, as we see Kylo Ren is, especially at the end of that whole throne room thing in The Last Jedi, when he's like,
Star Wars, the quest for power.
That's actually going to be the sequel to A New Beginning.
Yeah, there you go.
But he says we're going to start over, and the Jedi and the Sith, the rebellion, all of it. We're going to start over. Join me, Rey. But in TFA, he kills Han Solo, who is his father. Like, that is always something that's going to hang over somebody, whether you love your father or not. They are above you. They are your father. They're the one you look up to, or the one you despise, whatever it is. He eliminates that obstacle, that thing, just that elephant on his back. Then he thinks he's good, but it's not, because it sort of split him a bit. So then he's like, well, what do I do now? Let me kill my mentor. So he kills Snoke in the second one. And then he's like, all right, now it's my time. Then he becomes Supreme Leader. Then it's his time to do that. He runs the show now. And then we see what kind of a maniac he turns into at the end of that movie. So he's seeing this all in that way. And maybe the next part we'll play here, where he sort of talks about how the whole him and Rey thing, even though there's the clear Force connection in TLJ, he didn't see it as a he and Rey thing until the Rise of Skywalker stuff. I found that to be a very interesting comment, but we'll see exactly what he said about it.
I do feel a little bad for him, though, as this continues on, because it feels like the way he's painting it is a little bit, and I don't think he's regretful, and I think he's fine with how things turned out, but it does feel a little bit like that clown meme where he's like, yeah, oh yeah, you're gonna be evil the whole time, and he's like putting on the hair, and then like the second movie, they're like, yeah, I mean, you're hanging out with Rey, but like you're still evil, and he's like putting on the makeup. You know what I mean? And then you get to that last one, and they're like, actually, you're gonna be a good guy. And he's like,
what's my motivation here? You're bad. Yeah. You're very bad.
Yeah. And it's
now,
just
now,
like
now,
slowly...
now touch her finger. Now touch hands. Touch hands. You're very bad, though.
He's like, I don't know, Ryan. This feels a little like it's kind of borderline. And he's like, yeah, but you know, you're still on the dark and stuff, you know. And then by the last one,
should I put a shirt on in the scene? No. Shirt off. Full mist. But you're bad. You're still very evil. All right, let's see what else he says.
I just realized we're talking, and we're still, if you're watching on YouTube, we're still in the small squares. Yeah. Should have flipped us back. But here, let's watch a little bit more.
Into being, you know, about them and the dyad and things like that.
And then again, so you
and kind of evolving into Ben Solo.
Right.
That was never part of it.
That wasn't either.
No.
Because
Ben Solo, he was Ben Solo from the beginning,
right.
But it wasn't. It was never a version where we actually see Ben Solo. When I first saw it.
That's just wild, man. That like, it's so crazy to think, because I liked the idea of Kylo Ren, and I remember watching TFA and watching The Last Jedi and thinking like, this, you know, he's the new main villain. He's our new like big bad villain. This is going to be really cool. But at the same time, I do also completely understand the sentiment of, you know, Star Wars is about hope. It's about these families, and it's about, in the end, a happy ending. And it's a tough pill to swallow if they had Han and Leia's kid ending as the final villain and dying because of his descent into darkness and no return. But it's a big change that, you know, this whole redemption thing was just evolved out of them while shooting is pretty nuts. I don't know, because if it was JJ's idea to have him,
that's where I'm at too.
Yeah, if it was JJ's idea to have him be the quote opposite of Vader, two ships passing in the night. For some reason, the term reverse Vader is very triggering for people. But the opposite of Vader's path, as Adam Driver laid it out himself. I don't know why JJ would then be like, because as Adam Driver says, TLJ still tracks. So it's not one of those things like people think JJ didn't like what Ryan did, so now he had to do this. So if it's still tracked that he was on the descent to the furthest element of the dark side, why would JJ then be like, this sets up right where I wanted it, but we're going to change it? So I can't help but think Disney or Kathleen Kennedy and Michelle Rejwan said, no, listen, the fans are white hot about this redemption. We got to listen to the fans here. This is a mistake if we do this way. And they buckled to that, because if you remember, I really wanted to try to watch the Skywalker Legacy documentary, the episode 9 one, before we did this. Maybe before a future episode, especially with Lacey back, I think it'll be a good conversation. But I remember there's distinct parts of Michelle Rejwan that drives Lacey nuts. She hates it, but she says like it gives the story hope that he, he turns back and stuff, and then they kill him. But I can't help it because she was very vocal, Michelle Rejwan, on that set. And I know she comes from JJ's camp. So I wonder, I don't think that she would say something that would be able to be more powerful than what JJ wanted to say. I don't think that would work. So I can't help but think, Kathleen Kennedy gets wind of like pockets of fandom with the redemption and stuff like that. And I do really think they pay way more attention to online fandom than maybe they should. And that's coming from the Make Solo 2 Happen people. I think this comes from Kathleen Kennedy and or maybe Disney. What do you think?
Well, I'll throw in another alternative. Maybe it comes from JJ. Because
that's why I just said I don't think it's from JJ. That was what I just said. So, but
what I'm saying is I think that The Last Jedi, because we've already talked a little bit about this, where we're like, so Adam Driver was maybe even seeing the movie where he's like, oh, this still tracks for him being on the dark. And I think a lot of people really felt that way watching the movie. I think also a lot of people watched that movie and also felt completely opposite from that, saying like, no, this is more evidence that he should be redeemed. And I kind of feel like that's the very skilled directing ability of Rian Johnson. That's the movie he wanted to make. He wanted to ride the line the whole way through. And he did a very good job because everybody came split out of it. I don't think he intended it to actually like hurt people. I thought people would be like, oh man, it's so good because like you could see it both ways. And then he was going to let the last director decide, I'm curious if, and I know he said this was during filming, so maybe going into 9, JJ still maybe thought one way or the other, but I'm curious if JJ had this idea in Force Awakens, watched what Rian did, and made a lot of decisions on how 9 should go because of how he felt coming out of 8. And in that movie, he watched it and thought to himself, oh, I think this director is taking that character in a redemption direction.
Yeah.
He's toying the line, and I think when I look at the two options, to have the character sort of be here, then toy the line, then go far worse, it is not as good of a story in his period now that the 8 has been made, to go evil and then toy the line and then redeem. It's like he sort of is. We sometimes think of it like he bounced back, but JJ's like, no, I would have gone that direction, but instead I'm turning with
what's
Ryan's, because that's how he interpreted 8.
Yeah. What's kind of funny about all this? There's so many like cogs to this wheel that that led to this happening, because then I think about the Palpatine thing, and they're probably like, well, if we're going to redeem him, then like, what are we going to do? And they're like, well, we bring back Palpatine. And then like Palpatine, it's funny because people are annoyed about Palpatine returning, but if Palpatine doesn't return, you probably don't get redeemed Ben Solo. So it's like, will you take that in order to get the other thing? So Palpatine was probably a relatively late thing too, because everything I had heard, and I joked about it to be wink wink, but that Matt Smith was very much really supposed to be like a young Palpatine. Then they squashed that like either during filming or right before filming. So there were all these things constantly moving around. But if Palpatine was always supposed to be a part of it in some way, which by all the timelines I had heard it was, and Adam Driver saying the Ben Solo thing and the redemption thing didn't happen until into shooting, that means Palpatine was a part of it while Kylo Ren was still supposed to be full villain all the way through. Kind of interesting to think about.
Yeah. I mean, I just don't know, like, what constitutes, things changed during filming. Okay, like what kind of things? Like a complete restructure of the entire story? And
Yeah.
what type of thing changes that? Like, oh, can we get Ian McDermott? No? Okay. Well, we'll get Matt Smith and we'll do the story where
I think it was the
where
other
young
way.
what?
I don't think it was can we get Ian McDermott. McDermott will always play Palpatine. So
Well,
it was let's try this younger
sure.
thing, and JJ's probably like, we gotta get the guy. Like, we gotta get the guy. So they probably then went to McDermott. But
Yeah. I'm curious. I'm curious if the Matt Smith thing was like the lines that he delivered and things were like I always took it sort of as like he was going to be like they were going to get Ian McDermott and then he was going to like suck the life from the dyad and it was going to make him young. And they were going to be like young prime Palpatine. I thought that
would be cool, man.
Well, I thought that's always sort of been my understanding of him being involved with the movie. But now if you're talking about all these changes, there's always the possibility that like they could have been flashbacks to a younger version of him where he hears this news that one day somebody's going to be more powerful than him after his death. And so then he's like, no. And he's like, I'm going to do everything in my power to survive this or something. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Yeah, the Matt Smith stuff is really interesting as well. And I just please, like one day, I want that guy to just be like, has enough time passed? Yeah, I was gonna be like,
I was supposed to be Palpatine.
Yeah. Just say like what it was, what the story direction was when you were hired on, when you shot your scenes, when you did whatever. Like, just tell us what you were told. It's fine, like. Even like Adam Driver right now is disclosing a lot of information about the movie,
Yeah,
why can't Matt Smith?
It's very possible that even though George Lucas had said his ideas would have been, what happens to Darth Vader's grandchildren, and he's like, that's what my sequel trilogy would have been about, whatever. I wonder with this trilogy that we got, if making the villain a Skywalker or related in any way to Han and Leia was the mistake. Like, why couldn't Kylo Ren have just been Kylo Ren? And then it's not, well, you got to redeem him because he's Han and Leia's kid. Then you could say, no, he's our villain and he's going to be our villain through the end. And everyone's going to cheer when he dies. Like, maybe the mistake was making this character the son of Han and Leia. It still could be the Skywalker saga because you're bringing all the old characters back and they're training Rey. It doesn't have to be generational, in my opinion. I think the soap opera element that George Lucas found himself in once he made Darth Vader Luke's father in the second one might have hindered this whole thing in this trilogy.
Okay, you sent me down a path, and in my mind I go, yeah, like, okay, so he's the villain. What if they made him the one that kills Ben Solo? Like, he killed Ben Solo off screen, and that's why Rey hates him. And then I was like, oh, but then you could sort of reveal that he was Ben Solo. And then I was like, wait a minute, that's the Star Wars plot twist in the first 3 movies. I'm like,
well, yeah, but why did they just do this? Why wasn't it Kylo Ren is just Kylo Ren? He's not related to any of the Skywalkers. Big galaxy. Just a bad seed, bad kid, strong with the Force. That's all. He doesn't need to be anyone's kid, grandkid, whatever. And then have Rey, if you want to do the wild twist, there's enough twists in the sequel trilogy that maybe I think people would think are more ridiculous than this I'm about to say. Rey is the lost child of Han and Leia for some reason.
That was up for debate.
You make that work. So then it's still the Rise of Skywalker. It's still connected. Your hero is still a Skywalker, and Kylo Ren, the villain, dies. You don't have to bring Palpatine back, and everything else can fit around that without much change. I don't know. It's just we're getting in the weeds here on like what they should have done, and I'm not trying to say what they should have done because I love the sequel trilogy. I will watch the sequel trilogy and still be like, I love it. I still enjoy what they gave me. I like 7. I like 8. I like 9. I'm a rare breed. I like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 2 is my least favorite. Still love it. But I still think if they did that switch where she was the kid and Kylo Ren is just Kylo Ren, then you don't have to worry about this redemption stuff. You don't have to worry about, bringing Palpatine back or any of it. And it's just, but I don't know. But it's interesting to hear him talking about it. And I'd love, like you said, I would love to hear more talk about this stuff because I'm having fun talking about it right now. And it's just fun to speculate and wonder and all that without saying like they should have done this because it sucked. No, I still enjoyed it very much. But
they don't want anybody to know this stuff because it will make them look like they're confused or they don't know what they're doing. Too late. It's like, at least give us like the conversation and like justify it a little bit. Like they can open up and be honest, be like, well, this is, we were going to do that. We thought that through, and then we sort of landed on that wouldn't really work for these reasons, and maybe it would have, but at the same time, we thought that this would be a good direction, and just have an actual conversation about it. And I think people would appreciate it. It would definitely stir conversation in Star Wars. And we would get answers to things instead of just like people just consistently being like, they don't know what happened. Like they're idiots, like let them sort of defend their story. And maybe a lot of people will like hear it out and sort of understand that. I think what is interesting is this brings up that conversation of like, what if with the sequel trilogy, which I think is pretty common these days, but it reminds me of the what ifs for the prequels when they came out, because there was a popular video, at least I remember, of the what if episode 1 was good. And I remember the guy who did it like sort of does these little changes, and he's like, because he like if you made it this character or you introduced this, then it would have made
and I'm
it
not trying to do all
direction.
That. I'm just
no. Well, I think we are, and I think it's fun. It's fun to sort of think about the
but
other world of like what would be the difference if they changed certain things.
Yeah, but those guys do that stuff because they're like, it was crap, and this is how this is me who's never made a movie would have made it good. It's like, I'm saying I enjoyed what we got. I liked it a lot. If they did this, would it have been less complicated and flowed better? That type of stuff.
Right. I know. I mean, and I don't know that guy's intentions necessarily. He did say, what if episode 1 was good, implying that it was bad.
Yeah.
But I think what he was doing and what I've done before is like, I think I even said like, there's something in like episode 2 where like Anakin says all this stuff and he like freaks out in front of Padme, but he should have freaked out in front of Owen. And then they could have been like brothers having that conversation, and it wouldn't have, you know what I mean? And like, just the little changes like that would have changed certain things about the later movies and the understanding and blah, 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 blah. It's all backseat driver or Monday morning quarterback type stuff.
Kylo Ren does horrible things in the first 2 movies. He does horrible things off screen that we know about. He has ashes of his victims in his office. He is called the Jedi Killer. We're still trying to figure out all of that. But you have this whole contingent of fandom who was like, they got to redeem him. They better redeem him. And the only reason why they said that is because he's a Skywalker. Mm-hmm. If you free the fans of having to choose that path because of the story and the family soap opera, everyone would have been like, all together, this villain is so awesome. We love to hate him. We love to watch him die. And it would have been, that more of a communal experience as opposed to people like sparring over it. Just the fact that he was connected to the families and the son of Han and Leia was why people said he had to be redeemed. And I completely agree. I understand that fully. So it's maybe him not having been blood related or connected in that way would have been an easier path, but who knows? I still enjoy it. But before we get into our next story, I don't know if you had anything else in this. We do have a super chat.
Oh,
And
nice. Yeah, let's do it.
From the Spice Runner himself, Graybeard, David Probus.
Hey.
And Dave, thank you so much, David. Hope you're
Yeah.
doing well, buddy. Hope you're getting ready for Christmas and having a good time, whatever you're up to. He said, we need villains to stay bad. Sorry, not sorry. So we know David likes the dark side. We know he likes to cosplay as dark side. And that this comes to no surprise. But yeah, some villains definitely need to stay bad. We can't redeem them all. So thank you for that, David. Appreciate it, buddy.
That needs to be a t-shirt. It just says can't redeem them all.
Can't redeem them all. Yeah. All right, where are we at now? Let's get into our next story. Did we finish? We finished the clip, right? There wasn't much more to dissect.
No, that was it. That was it for the clip. And if you guys want to talk, if you want to hear us talk a little bit more about this story, I think we're going to be discussing it even further on, or we're going to be discussing similar topics on Monday. So
yeah, Monday is going to be probably more of a visual effects focus, but there are certain elements that do change in movies, and we'll get into that. But yeah, next story. What do we got? Another wild one.
Yeah. So days after Jeff Snyder reported a rumor that The Mandalorian Season 4 is going to be reworked as a movie, a new report claimed that is inaccurate, and Mando Season 4 rolls on with filming reportedly starting in February. Now that comes from Bespin Bulletin. This to me, I'll just start it off because I know you know the details better than I do, but when you start to get into the weeds of people going back and forth on like what they've heard behind the scenes, I start to just distance in my caringness. I go, you know what? At the end of the day, it's interesting if somebody wants to pop in and say, hey, they're changing Mandalorian Season 4 into a movie. And, but if somebody else is going to come out and say that's inaccurate and my sources say, then I just start to say, I'll just wait until they announce whatever it is. I really don't care. I can have my opinions on what I think they should do, which we've discussed when we talk, well, I guess we didn't really talk about it last week. It was like right after we did the show, right? Or was it during?
It was the day after.
It was the day after. Yeah. So we haven't really fully talked about it yet, but I don't know. My thoughts are when it starts to go back and forth, I just sort of distance myself from the argument and go, I'll just wait and see whatever they do. Like, I don't really have an opinion. I like a story, but when it gets argumentative, I'm not really sure which way. And I'm not sure they're argumentative necessarily, but what are your thoughts on this sort of being, I don't want to say redacted because Jeff didn't change his mind, right? But it's sort of been challenged.
Yeah, challenged. Yeah, I never believed that The Mandalorian was going to shift into a movie. I think that, and I don't know where I said this, but I think that just would be a dangerous precedent for Star Wars. I think that, having your first new movie being a converted TV show is a weak look for the grandest movie franchise of all time. I still am looking forward to Dave Filoni's movie, which is going to encompass all of these shows in a bigger scale. But to say the Mando is going to convert, I did not like hearing that rumor. I'll just put it that way. I do believe that it is still a show. And part of what makes me believe that is just how seemingly accessible Manhattan Beach and those studios are to spies and looky-loos, and I'm sure that people are seeing crews setting up and all that sort of thing to coincide with the timeline of the Mandalorian saying, or not the Mandalorian, like Favreau and the crew saying like, well, we were going to start at this time, we're going to have to push it back, and the original thought was that they were going to start filming in September, October. The strike happens, delays happen for 4 months, and now Bespin Bulletin saying February, 4 months after October. What is it? February. So a lot of that checks out to me, unless he used the same logic. But I think Mando Season 4 is still Mando Season 4. I think Disney Plus needs The Mandalorian also. That's another element to this. I still think that Rey movie is going to be that first Rey movie. So I know Jeff has been right about a lot of things, and to his credit, he had said his Disney source told him this, and that it's only being identified as a rumor. He's not putting it out on that it's some exclusive or anything. Yeah, he said it on his podcast. But I do believe that The Mandalorian Season 4 is still very much The Mandalorian Season 4 and not a movie. So I don't think that rumor was is true, that it was going to be converted into a movie.
Yeah. So we're kind of Lacey's not here, but I do know that she has continually said that it makes sense to her that the Mandalorian would lead into a movie. And I've seen those arguments, like when Jeff gave his report, I saw a lot of people being like, yes, that makes perfect sense, and here's why, and I would see the reasons. I still sort of feel like there's this sort of thing where, like, you don't ever give people you don't make people pay for something that used to be free. And while you're paying for Disney Plus, I think because it's streaming, I think when people say like, oh, it's not going to be in theaters, it's going to be on Netflix, people are just like, oh, I don't have to pay to see it. There's something about the streaming service that just kind of feels like it's just free. It's just going and it's available for anybody who wants to watch it. And so I sort of think of The Mandalorian like that. It's just, the episodes will air at my house, and I don't have to pay to go see it. It's not going to be an event. It's just when they come out, I can watch them. And I think to take that away and sort of turn the next chapter into this movie, and then sort of return maybe to the TV, or like, is it Mando movies all the way up until the finale? Or is it this movie and then Mando's done until they get to the finale? It just, all of that just seems a little odd to me. I think what makes the other movie special is that it's going to be combining like multiple stories. It's going to be like the Skeleton Crew and Ahsoka and Mandalorian, and you're not really getting that on Disney Plus, because you have to watch them individually on Disney Plus. This is like where they all cross over together in a big way. I still think that's still a little strange to me that we end up in a place where, like, you've been watching all of, I don't even know, Ballers or something, right? And then the last little hurrah is like in the theaters. I think that's a little strange. I know people point to examples of when that has happened, but even some of those examples to me are like, no, the show ended and then years later they made a movie. It wasn't like, if you want to see how it ends, you have to go see the movie.
Well, it doesn't matter whether it's been done before or not. It's just whether or not if it's a good idea, and then whether or not they pull it off.
Well, I think you can. To anybody else's defense on that, like, I think you can point to, like, I'm saying it won't work, and people are like, but it has worked. See, you can see here.
Yeah, I'm saying it doesn't matter whether or not it's happened before or not. Like, because Ballers is Ballers, Entourage is Entourage, and Star Wars is Star Wars. I also think if it was just a Mando movie and they're like, oh, we're doing a Mando movie now, and then all of a sudden it's just like 50 times the quality of special effects, and you're like, what? And then you try to watch Mando season 1, 2, and 3, and you're like watching Lizzo and Jack Black play with like these magic orbs over a dinner table, and then like all of a sudden you're thrust into this movie and it's this big gigantic thing. It would feel disjointed and feel a little strange.
Also, how do you feel about like this? Like, who would direct this movie? Is this?
Yeah, Dave? I don't know. Well, I don't think it's a thing. So my guess would be maybe Snyder thought this was the Dave movie. Otherwise, the other choice would be Favreau, of course. But I don't buy it. I don't think it is. I do believe this new report that it is still season 4, and I'm sure people's eyes on the ground over there, because it's pretty easy to find that studio, and it's not hard to find people walking around big giant garbage bags over their costumes, and crews setting up and building, with the way drones are today. Unless you want to dome that whole area in Manhattan Beach, you're going to see people setting up Star Warsy looking things. And what other show right now would be filming in that studio? There's nothing. So it's not Andor, it's not Acolyte's done. Skeleton Crew's done. There's been no word yet of any future of Boba Fett. But it's got to be for Mando. So
still
I'm sure
perfectly the Boba Fett thing. Still perfectly like, yeah, that makes sense. And also, what the heck? You know, like it's so balanced between like that makes perfect sense that they're never doing another one, and also like I don't understand why they're not doing another one. I don't know.
Yeah, so I think it's pretty clear, at least to me, that it is Mando season 4, and that thankfully, at least in my opinion, that rumor that Mando's becoming the next Star Wars movie is not true. Because I think that would be such a bad look and a weak look for Star Wars. So I'm glad that that's hopefully not accurate.
All right.
Oh, a quick reminder about Ask the Resistance. If people want to send in questions, we do have a few already sent in, so thank you. If you do want to get on the show and you have a cool Star Wars question you want us to talk about, just pop it in the live chat with hashtag Ask the Resistance. And you can always send us questions via email, resistancebroadcast@gmail.com, or on social media, stuff like that. So thanks, everybody. Sorry, James.
No, I was going to say that. And then we were going to talk about our last story before we get to that, Ask the Resistance. But the last story is that there was a book announcement for a Mace Windu story, sort of a novel about him finishing Qui-Gon Jinn's last mission, something that he was supposed to do, didn't get the chance to. And now Mace Windu will have to finish that for him. And it's kind of interesting that it's called The Glass Abyss, because when I think of Mace Windu, I think of glass and a giant abyss that he falls down. I don't know if that's intentional or not, but a lot of purple on this cover. And
also Samuel L. Jackson's character in Unbreakable is Mr. Glass.
Oh, that's true too. I didn't even think of that. Yeah, quite interesting. The connections here. Do you have any thoughts on this story? What do you think?
I think it's very cool. Because you know why? I think there is an appetite for Mace Windu, and you always hear about it, whether it's just conversations you have with prequel fans or just Star Wars fans in general, or Samuel L. Jackson fans, and even Samuel L. Jackson saying like, yeah, I'll come back. And I think he's like 77 now, and he's still like, yeah, I'll come back. Let's go. But this is a good spot for him, because I am of the belief that it's very important that Mace Windu did die in that moment in Revenge of the Sith. So how do you bring Mace Windu back? This is a good spot for it here. And I love that it is a big thing for him to do, which is an element of closure in helping, Qui-Gon sort of seal the deal in terms of finishing, loose threads he had or things he wanted to, finish as a Jedi. So I like this idea. I don't know that I'm going to read it. I usually don't read the Star Wars novels very often. But the idea of it sounds cool. It gives people that dose of Mace Windu maybe they've been looking for a long time, and comes out next summer. I'm not too familiar with Stephen Barnes in terms of books, so if anyone in the chat wants to educate me on that, or if James, if you happen to know, but it looks like he's written quite a bit over the last 40 years. So he's been writing for a very long time. But yeah, I'm excited for fans who love reading Star Wars novels, but also particularly fans of Mace Windu. I think this could be a pretty cool story.
So yeah, the last line of the synopsis is that Mace Windu finds himself pushed to the boundaries of the Jedi Code, challenging his beliefs and his relationship to the Force itself. It's quite interesting that it will be to that extreme. I'm also wondering if this is a story that somebody could sort of, you know how they always do, like if there's some type of underlying thread to a character, they can sort of confirm that that's how they got from point A to point B with a novel. I wonder if this book will sort of imply that when there is an evil that is in fact going to just like kill all these people or do something so incredibly bad, that evil just needs to be stopped. You know, it can't be brought in, it can't be talked to, it can't be convinced otherwise. It just has to be destroyed. And that
The
type of
Terminator.
mentality, well, maybe that type of mentality is what maybe Mace Windu carries into the fact that the Sith are back and we know it's this guy. If I can prove that it's this guy, you know, if he starts fighting me, my decision is already final because I went on this mission, you know, that Qui-Gon was investigating, and, you know, were his final wishes to look into more. So maybe that's him questioning his relationship to the Force, because he didn't believe that before, but now he does, and that's how he approaches Palpatine. I also like the cover too, if anybody checks it out. Do you think that's the Jedi symbol, or do you think that's like the future rebellion symbol? Like, what are we implying there with that?
To me, it looks like the Jedi symbol at first glance.
And that's fair. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's a very cool cover. I like that they didn't try to do any sort of different take on what, you know, maybe, you know, Mace Windu could look like. They're just like, no, this is Samuel L. Jackson right there on the cover. I think it's a very sharp, cool looking cover, and it's always cool seeing his lightsaber, which is a unique one because he told George Lucas, no, I'm having a purple lightsaber, and George's like, okay.
It is kind of funny. I mean, I know they probably know that if they put Samuel L. Jackson on the cover, it will sell more than if you were to do it. But it is funny that, you know, you don't see a book like this and they do an artistic rendition of like Clone Wars. You know, I guess because that is already the artistic interpretation of the character. You know, I don't know. Anyway.
I did, as you know, a little multitasking. The author Stephen Barnes wrote the 2004 novel The Cestus Deception, which is a Star Wars novel set in the Clone Wars era. So expanded universe revolves around Count Dooku, Obi-Wan, Kit Fisto, and it was a New York Times bestseller. So 20 years later, he's coming back to do another Star Wars novel. So Stephen Barnes, no stranger to Star Wars, wrote a novel years before the transaction. Yeah, in 2004, and mind you, 2004 before the Clone Wars movie or the Clone Wars series came out. So that's called the Cestus Deception, Cestus Deception. If you want to get a taste of what Stephen Barnes' writing is like in Star Wars, that's the book to go for. So very cool story there. We're good on the news, James?
Yeah, I think that's it for Resistance Report this week. And if you want, we could just get into those Ask the Resistance questions with the segment starting now.
I've been wondering, what are midichlorians?
All right. Hopefully he got his Turbo Man. I know it's getting close to that time of year. But yeah. And hopefully people got that reference. Which I'm not going to say what it was. All right. Ask the Resistance. This is usually how it goes. If we're doing a live show, we're taking them right from the chat. But sometimes you could also send those to us in other ways. Just make sure you're using that hashtag. Ask the Resistance on social media. We'll find it. Or if you want to email it to us or what have you. But the first one here, James, is coming from the great Mike Lovins, Kiss fan himself. Mike, I hope you're doing well in the morning of the band Kiss, who has allegedly played their last show. Did you see that? The Kiss is coming back as like digital avatars now that they retired playing live.
No, I didn't see that. But you know what's weird? There's like a new trend of people playing their last show without telling people it's their last show. Like they're like, oh, tonight's the last show we're ever gonna play, or like, oh, our last show, yeah, that was like in June. We're never playing again. And I'm like, why is that a trend, man? Don't people think it should be like, hey, we're gonna do, maybe that's overplayed of like final tour ever, and then they end up playing again together. So
yeah, the Kiss has done like 3 farewell tours, I think, at this point.
Oh,
honestly.
really?
Yeah. And they've broken up and got back together.
So maybe they thought that was outplayed, and they were just like, nah, we already did it. Yeah.
I think they're also just getting too old to do it. But
oh yeah.
All right, Mike comes at us with, what's one of the best Star Wars Christmas gifts that you've received? I mean, I've gotten a bunch of really good ones. Christmas specific.
Off the top of my head, I mean, I don't know. I feel bad that like somebody maybe got me something that was like really cool, but off the top of my head, I can't really think of anything specifically.
Yeah, I've gotten a bunch of cool Star Wars gifts, but for Christmas specifically, I think I might have to go with my brother got me my favorite shot in Star Wars on a canvas painting, and it's Darth Vader in the silhouette in the carbon chamber when he's telling Luke he's not a Jedi yet. I'll put that up there as mine. I mean, if I think of others, I'll let you know, but I'm going to put that up there as my pick.
I know that I got a visual dictionary when The Force Awakens came out, and at the time, like, I wasn't doing like the podcasting yet, you know, and it's just like at the time it was like kind of like Star Wars is back, and that visual dictionary was like all this cool like insider lore and you know, you can learn this stuff, and I just remember like having that and feeling like really excited to dive into some of that stuff. But also, now that I'm thinking a little bit further, I also want to mention too, like when we were at Star Wars Newsnet, the owner Val would always like do this big like end of year holiday thing.
Yes, yeah,
and that was always really fun, you know.
Yeah,
so
I did.
It wasn't necessarily about the gift as so much it was like about the getting of the gift.
That was fun. Yeah, that was fun. We had this sort of like raffle in a sense for items, and you had to put your hat in the ring for an item, and there was some definitely cool stuff in there too.
Yeah, if there were like 30 writers, he bought 30 gifts, and it was like you're gonna end up with one of them.
Yeah,
like,
and then there would always be like the few items where
voting.
everyone's like, that's the one
Right,
I want.
yeah.
I also have, I don't know if it was for Christmas or not, but I have that book of George Lucas's hand-picked favorite shots from all the movies. Yeah. But yeah, let us know in the chat or hit us up on social media and let us know what your favorite Star Wars Christmas gift has been. Thank you, Mike, for that question. Appreciate it, buddy. Hope you're well. Next up, we have a super chat cut to the front of the line, James.
Hey.
It's Sooner Thrawn.
There he is.
Checking in. How you doing, pal? He said, are you going to do a Rebel Moon spoiler reaction, maybe he's saying, after the holidays? I would be down for that. We haven't talked about it. I know Lacey had said she's very interested in watching that movie. You going to watch it, James?
You know, there's a lot of stuff that I want to watch. Like I am very surprised that I haven't started that show, or like certain things that I like have started. I'm like, it's really surprising that I haven't finished. I think it's one of those things where like I do intend to watch it or would like to watch it. But I think the biggest appeal of it is the whole like Zack Snyder pitched a Star Wars movie. Lucasfilm said no, and then he said, I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
So
and on the red carpet for it, I don't know if it was his wife, but they just flat out said like, yeah, this was going to be a Star Wars movie. It wasn't like we had an idea and then it evolved into this. So she's like,
yeah, they were like,
she's like, well, it was a Star Wars movie, and now so just try to watch Rebel Moon and say like, oh, that would have been like this, that would have taken place here or something. But I'm going to check it out. We haven't talked about it. I'd be down to cover this and talk about it and have some fun with it. But it's nothing we've decided yet. So we'll see.
I think that at one point when they did, then like Zack Snyder did something really cool. He was like at an event and he was like directing people. Did you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was actually on the floor and their exhibit. He was like, directing fans and the scene and put them in the movie and stuff. And I remember retweeting it and saying like, this could have been Star Wars. And I got a lot of responses from people being like, when the movie inevitably sucks, I'm going to be glad it wasn't Star Wars. And I'm like, man, this movie better be good, because
the thing about Zack
it's
Snyder,
going to get a lot of like, thank God that we didn't let that guy do Star Wars.
Zack Snyder has a very distinct cinematography. I don't know how that would have played in Star Wars and being looking so different. And also, I do think, even though Zack Snyder seems like a great guy, he seems so nice, he's very good with fans, and everyone who ever works for him loves him. There's, for whatever reason, maybe it's like the fanboy stuff people get turned off from, but he's a divisive person. You know, and I don't know why he is. Fans have made him that way, but I don't know that would be a good thing for fandom. But
Sure.
he's doing his own thing, and I'm gonna check it out and we'll see. But thank you, Super Thrawn.
Yeah.
Super Thrawn for that. Yeah, you are Super Thrawn. Okay. One more question here. We will go with Matt Lawless to end the show. Matt said, "Which Jedi do you want to see in Tales of the Jedi Season 2?"
Oh,
Plo Koon, right?
Sure. I don't know.
Because we already saw a bunch of them that I would have picked.
I'm trying to remember, like, who did we see? We saw
well, Dooku and Ahsoka, of course.
Dooku and Ahsoka, and then was there Mace, and there was like a Mace Windu one.
Well, a lot of them were in the episodes, but they weren't focused on them because it was mostly like Ahsoka episodes, Dooku episodes, and there's, you know, Qui-Gon's involved.
Were those the only two then? Was it just 3 Dooku episodes, 3 Ahsoka episodes?
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and I say Plo Koon because you know, Dave Filoni loves Plo Koon, and there's like people just wishing there was more of him, but I don't know if I have another answer beyond that. If the question is based on someone we haven't seen, if it's someone we have seen, I'd love more Qui-Gon. I would never get tired of seeing more Qui-Gon stories, so that would be my pick. But if it's someone we haven't really had a focus on that heavily, I would say someone cool like Plo Koon.
A Depa Billaba for me,
because it's fun to say.
No, but mostly because of the connection to Kanan. And specifically, sort of the Kanan comics tells a little bit of her story and her failures.
Oh, that's cool.
And then that's how Kanan was sort of connected to her. Yeah, I don't know. Like, it's kind of one of those things where, like, this is one of those impromptu questions, Matt. You know what I mean? Where it's like on the spot, and I'm like, I bet I could give some really cool ideas if I just had a minute to kind of think about who I'd want to see. But you know, that's off the top of my head.
You like marinating and thinking about like choices.
Yeah, because my gut right now is like, oh, so we didn't get one about Mace Windu or Yoda. Mace Windu, Yoda, you know, but like I want a better answer than that. I want like, oh, you know what I should have said is, and I'll say Depa Billaba right now because any connection.
Am I allowed to say Qui-Gon? If I am, yes. If not, go Plo Koon. Thank you, Matt. Appreciate the question. Thank you to everybody who sent in the questions. Thank you for the super chats. And everybody who watched and joined us live. I do want to also give a shout out to our patrons at patreon.com/resistance broadcast. You help us out in such a big way, and we have a really big year coming up in 24 and of course 25. So thank you for all your continued support to allow us to continue to do what we do, as we also have normal lives and families and all that stuff while we do this thing. And if you'd like to join us over there on Patreon, we have exclusive content there and a lot of other cool benefits, rewards, perks, a Discord server. Just head over to the link right on your browser, patreon.com/resistance broadcast, or the Patreon app. Look us up. Tiers start at $5. And away you go. Access immediately. You can submit questions to the show, which you'll see on Monday. A lot of other cool stuff. But a big shout out to the Generals and Spice Runners over there on Patreon. Starting with the OG of OGs, Carmelo, John RISI, JEDTA Rosewater, Frank Grande, Nick Kratz, Chris Morales, Brian Smith, Matt Chitty, Danny, Mike Ramori, Brendan McLaughlin, Sneaky Zebra, Colin Cormier, Jolton Jedi DiMaggio, Diana and Dave Hornack, and the Spice Runners, David Probus, Neil Shaw, Kendall Gelner, Andrew Staley, Jeremy Myers, Michael Fry, and the Fortworthian. A couple of them I saw in the chat. I believe I saw Andrew, David, pop it in there. So, and yeah, a few people. Thank you. very much to everybody who also just listens, watches, however you take in TRB. It means a lot to us. We appreciate it. And more Star Wars on the way. As far as we go, Lacey should be back with us next Thursday. As we said, we're going to have our holiday party. So be sure to hit up Lacey at Lacey Gilleran and say that you're so excited she's coming back.
Woohoo.
Let her know. And for me, I am at Johnny Hoey on social media and my movie podcast, Just Like the Movies. We're doing maybe our newest movie. Yeah, we're doing Once Upon a Time in Hollywood next week. You know me, I like Tarantino. Maybe not in Star Wars, though, but I love Tarantino. James, how about you?
You can find me at Meyer Trunks on social media, but I got you, Matt. I got the answer. I figured it out. Burry Safi.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
So here's what you do. Because it was 3 episodes each for the characters, show us an episode where she was very like dedicated, loyal, and very happy to serve as a Jedi. Give us the episode where the first time she's like, whoa, like maybe I'm on the wrong side. Maybe I'm fighting the wrong battle. Maybe, I should switch. She's indifferent. And then give us the episode where we can finally put to rest what happened to that character. What's the story? How'd she die or where's she at right now? And just that be the arc for that character. 1, 2, 3.
That's pretty good. I'm not not gonna lie. That's pretty good. Clever. I like it.
There we go.
Thank you all. Appreciate it all very much. Have a wonderful weekend. Be safe out there if you're shopping or whatever you're doing. Stay warm, stay safe. And me and James will be back with you on Monday, where we're gonna talk a little bit about. You think they'll ever make some tweaks to these current slate of Star Wars the way George Lucas did? So get your mind going on that, and we'll see you Monday with another episode right here on the Resistance broadcast. We'll see you around, kids.